And I know I've said this before, but whenever I say that, I literally in my mind imagine that we're walking across the street and we meet each other at that intersection and we're both coming from something and we're both going to somewhere and just, making that reconnection. But in my mind's eye, I see an intersection, a street where we're crossing together and moving in and out of our congregations, our organizations, out into the world and um, being about that work. So it's great to see you all this morning. To give others just a little bit, I'm sorry. Just to give everyone a little bit more time to join in. We're in Dream Week, and which now is like 17 days. And some of us joke about how it should be called Dream Month. But the other night I was at one of the events and I suggested that instead of calling it Dream Week, we should start calling it Dream Strong. And maybe we should be talking about deep, real dreams that we have in this world, important ones, and sharing those. So I wanted to share with you my dream. And maybe we'll have a future conversation, or maybe it'll come up today. I don't know. But my dream and strong, my strong, real dream is that our children on this planet, that their first language, no matter what language they speak where they live on the planet, but that their first language be the language of compassion. And then if all we have to do with that language is to translate it from one geography to another geography, or that will be nothing if our first language on the planet is the language of compassion. And I know it probably sounds like some, I don't know, beauty contest answer or something, but that's not it. That's my dream. And so what that tells me is that education has to be a part of that dream. And so we're working at that. Action in the world has to be a part of that dream. So people know what compassion is when they see it. And so I really seriously invite all of you to be thinking about your strong dream that you're working at today, but it's the dream that you're working toward as well. So, if somebody's got one of those and just wants to put that in chat along the way, that would be awesome. But I really would like to hear those. I asked somebody the other night and they said, I'm going to have to think on that and get back to you. That's great. But I think we should be thinking on our dream big. So I invite you to do that. This weekend on Sunday is the Festival of Faiths, the very first one. I want to encourage you to go. It's from 1 until 6 at the University of Incarnate Word. And the easiest thing to do, I could tell you the exact space and everything, but just go where all the cars and the people are. It's Sunday on the University of Incarnate Word campus, and that's where it'll be, right? So, but it's in that area that faces Broadway, in that kind of corner, as opposed to like back campus or anything. So that'll help you a little bit. Maybe one more quick announcement. Hey, I will throw in the blessing of the Peacemakers, which is a week from Sunday. So you can mark your calendar. It's from 3 until 5 at Northwest Vista College. And the San Antonio Peace Laureate 2024 will be announced that day and celebrated. So I hope you all come. If you haven't been before, it's a beautiful blessing. And it blesses all those, everyone here on this screen, everyone who shows up, for all your peacemaking work, compassion work.
Can you send it to me again?
Sure.
Oh, no, Friday. The Friday, I know what it is. Yeah.
She's not talking to me. So there we go. Anyway.
And
yes. Sorry, Lori, I just muted you before she's open up, Lori. I think that was her. Somebody said Anne.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good
Hello,
morning.
it's me. It's Lori.
Okay,
I
go ahead, Lori.
okay, thanks. I am driving, so I will mute myself again as soon as I'm done making this announcement. But Archbishop is hosting a event at Oblate School of Theology on Tuesday morning for week of prayer for Christian unity. And it's just a 9 till noon or 12:30 because lunch is provided gathering for any Christian ministers who would like to join him in this conversation about this year's theme, which is, oh gosh, it just slipped my mind, but I believe it's do unto others. I think that's the theme. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just drew a blank on that. But anyway, if you want any information, you can contact me at the Archdiocese. You can just call the main number and ask for Lori, and they'll connect you to me.
Great. And you can put that information in chat when you remember the theme and
Okay.
everything. You could just put that
Okay.
there.
All right,
right.
I'll do that. Thank
Great.
you.
And your contact info. So good morning.
Okay.
This morning, Doug Beach with NAMI and Pathways to Hope. You might remember sometime back that there was that a woman had died, and I also put on the notification yesterday, I attached Doug's op-ed. So I'm hoping that some of you had time to read that to kind of bring us back into this context. But we had at the intersections shortly after it happened, we had a briefing on it and we talked about it. Things have been happening. And so Doug wanted to come back and share with us what has been happening in that direction. What I'd like to do, though, before Doug begins, is to invite everybody to think about what we have been talking about across all of the intersection, but especially in the last month or so. Healing, how we heal as a community, as a group of people, how we heal from collective trauma. We've also been talking about healing from different faith traditions and religions. And so I invite all of those things that we've kind of been learning together. And as we listen to Doug, to kind of put that information in what we've been learning. And so what does that mean for us and how might we move forward? So Doug, bring us up to date and tell us about Melissa's story.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And it was something that I felt like more people need to understand not just what happened with Melissa Perez, but how people dealing with mental health issues get help. So Melissa Perez, and what normally happens is when a family member or a friend or somebody sees a person with a mental health issue and they're struggling, they need help, it's not life-threatening, they're not a threat to themselves or others, but they're in a crisis. They may not have taken their medication, they may, something traumatic may have happened, it may have. So what happens across the United States is in communities, including San Antonio, if you find yourself in that position where you feel like I need help, I need some assistance, the protocol has been to call in the past 911 and ask for a mental health officer. The 911 operators are trained then to ask a few questions, and historically a mental health officer, that is a trained person, and in San Antonio we have 17 people in the mental health unit. A trained mental health officer is dispatched, and they're dispatched in a team. And these are individuals who have been selected because of their psychological profile. They've proven that they are empathetic. They're the kind of person that knows how to de-escalate and be compassionate and caring. So when a mental health officer shows up, and my wife and I have been in that position where we've had to call for help. It's been some years, but so we've witnessed this multiple times. When a mental health officer from the unit shows up, they show up in a polo shirt, blue jeans, sneakers, an unmarked car, no sidearm. They're good. They're outstanding. And many times my wife and I would pray for angels to come alongside our son to take care of him. And I've told the officers, I said, you guys are angels. You are wonderful. You save lives. You're amazing. What happened with Melissa Perez? So when Melissa was not taking her medication, and when she went at the apartment complex where she lived and started shutting off the electricity because she felt like the CIA or some secretive agency was listening in on her, she was having a psychotic episode. So she shut off the electricity, and the family called for a mental health officer. They made a mental health call for assistance. And what happened was that 3 officers showed up, none of whom were in the mental health unit. And you can see the video, you can play it, it's online. Then more officers showed up. A supervisor was called to the scene. And in the process, Melissa went in, she was in her apartment. And she picked up a lamp, and she was, disturbed, she was agitated. The police hopped the balcony to her home. So they were on her patio, looking in through the window, and she has a lamp in her hand. They told her to put it down. And when she didn't, they shot her to death. It was beyond belief. Now, what happened was against all protocol. Only later were mental health officers called to the scene. So in my looking at this, what it concerned me, and I started asking questions about, well, what happened here? So I've met with the police chief, the city manager, the assistant city manager, the assistant police chief in charge of the mental health unit, and we've had multiple conversations about what went wrong. And part of what I discovered was that at one point 7 years ago, the calling a mental health officer to the scene, or a mental health officer responding, was a standard protocol. Today, about 7 years ago, beginning 7 years ago, that was changed. Now a patrol unit responds to those calls first. And if they perceive that there's a mental health issue, they may call for backup. But let me remind you, the person calling already asked for mental health assistance. So that's known. What happens when a patrol unit comes? Well, first of all, 2 officers come in a marked car, in uniform, with sidearms. And if anybody on this screen had a police officer show up in a marked car with a weapon, in uniform, and you were already agitated, anybody on this call would become more agitated. It's a trigger for people who are already in distress. That's why mental health officers show up not in uniform, but in street clothes. And they know how to de-escalate the situation. All SAPD officers receive 40 hours of what we call crisis intervention or de-escalation training when they join the force. And then I found out recently, every 3 years, they receive another 8 hours of training. But they're not the same people as a mental health officer. and it was never intended that they be the primary response. So what we're asking for is that we go back to the protocol that existed 7 years ago, and one that my wife and I witnessed, to where a mental health officer is the first response. There are 17 officers in that unit, 1 supervisor and 16 officers. Most recently, there's a new program in the city called SATX, which is made up of an EMT, emergency medical technician, a behavioral health clinician from CHCS, and a third person, and they're a multidisciplinary response team. The third person is a trained police officer. There's 1 unit. In this past year's budget, 2 more units were authorized, and the units were authorized to be able to respond 24/7. That will not take place until May of this year. Now, I want you to think about this. We're a city of 1.4 million people. We will soon have 3 SA Core units, and we have 17 officers in the mental health unit. We have 30,000 mental health calls a year in San Antonio. We can't handle the number of mental health calls with the 1 SA Core unit, and we're not even sending the mental health unit out, mental health officer unit out as a first response today. So what I'm asking for, and I've talked to the chief about, is different strategies for how to respond to mental health calls, so that we can avoid the kind of situation that we had with Melissa Perez. I received a publication yesterday from the Bazelon Center for Mental Health Law and the Vera Institute for Justice. And in a nutshell, what it says is that the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services have just issued a statement that says, quote, federal law requires that people with behavioral health and other disabilities receive a health response, not a law enforcement response. It's a violation of their civil rights to send somebody who is not providing a health response. So this goes to the heart of the issue, is that we need to be responding to people who are in a mental health crisis with the proper response. It's just, and I said in the op-ed, if you have a heart attack, we don't send the police. We send an EMT, we send medical professionals. So if a person is having a mental health crisis, why shouldn't we be sending mental health professionals? People have expressed the concern, well, these people are violent, it's dangerous. Well, the truth is that the vast majority, well, first of all, when a person makes a mental health call and asks for help, they're asked the question, is there a weapon, at the scene? Does the person have access to a weapon? The police already know that. So in the vast majority of cases, there is no weapon involved. And the police put these calls into 3 buckets. And the bucket that is the immediate need and disturbance, which could be a person, for example, threatening to die by suicide or jump off a bridge, or those are calls for which the police will go and they get categorized that way. Other calls are more routine calls. In Denver, they have a very similar situation, 30,000 calls a year. They have what they call community response units, which are mental health professionals responding to their calls. They answer 15,000 of those calls with the mental health teams. The other 15,000 go to their police department and to officers that have been trained. This across the country, a different protocol is being used than the one we are using in San Antonio right now. This is unacceptable for families and individuals who are impacted by a mental health issue, that we would send uniformed police officers today as our first response. And we saw what happened. And I think it's I'll just say right now that if we continue to handle these calls this way, we will have other shootings. The other thing I want to say is that we take a lot of calls at NAMI from families that have called the police for help. And in too many instances, the kind of help that they receive is they've been beaten up for quote unquote resisting arrest when they're in a psychotic state. They're not being treated well. They're not being treated like they should be treated. And we know how to do better. So my ask is that we go back to the way that we used to do these calls. Today, SAPD Mental Health Unit has been reassigned to do training and to respond to fusion or terrorism type calls. So we've taken the resource that we had, a well-trained, excellent unit in our city, and we've reallocated those hours and those people to other tasks than responding to mental health calls from our community. So that's what I wanted to acquaint the people on the call with. I wanted to explain this. We can do better. I've had conversations, a brief conversation with the mayor. I've called on probably 2/3 of the city council people. And I think basically there's a real lack of understanding as to what happens on these calls and what the proper response is and who's responding. And I think we need more public education as to what type of response is appropriate and what happens on these calls. So with that, Ann, let me throw it open to any questions that people may have or just comments.
Well, I want just a point of clarification. So you started with, what we used to do, and then you gave us this wonderful briefing. I'm really impressed by the whole Denver, Colorado, and community response team. You said that you want us to go back to what we were doing. So could you just describe specifically what that is again, so people remember?
So what we want to see is, there are two options. One is for the mental health unit, those 17 officers, to go back as the first response to a mental health call. The other option, which the city is moving on, are these multidisciplinary teams. So we want to build up the number of multidisciplinary teams, which are made up of mental health professionals, EMTs, and trained police officers. That's what Denver does. So the idea is that we would have enough of those teams to be able to respond to mental health calls. The county started this program 1.5 to 2 years before the city launched theirs. The county has an excellent program and is sending out their SMART teams. They call, instead of SA Core, they call them SMART teams. But the county is sending out, they have 3 units at this point. So 1, we want mental health officers to be the first response. 2, we want to increase the number of multidisciplinary teams, and we want to move to that multidisciplinary approach.
Great. I just want to make sure that was kind of clear in everybody's heads. So one of the things, and I see Peter has his hand up, and we'll go there, but I'm also kind of thinking that community context and the things that we've been talking about in terms of healing. And so one of the first places I go to is, If it were you, how would you want to be treated? It's that whole to treat others how you wish to be treated. If you were in that situation, what would you want to have happen, right? And anyway, so that's where I'm thinking. Peter, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Anne. And thank you, Doug. Greatly appreciate your advocacy in this work. And for establishing the Bridges to Care mental wellness program, when we were looking for how we would introduce it to our ministry, it was about security, our security team, and how they would engage with the mental health issues. And that's what started to move us toward finding what ultimately was the Bridges to Care. And so we embraced it now in our ministry, and we started the program. And so I completely understand that first responder and equipping them. And so I want to continue to advocate with you in that respect with SAPD. My question is related to the crime prevention plan that the city and Metro Health has created, and your involvement in that. I know that Erica has been leading that. I think it's an excellent plan. Just wanted to get your feedback on that component, the mental health support for SAPD and the response to our community, and see how we can advocate for that within the plan, and hopefully get it to where we can go back to and improve. But I think being first responders on the ground, when we respond, I think, and this is what I shared with our community, is that we are able to mitigate tragedies right up front before even SAPD gets there. So we can also be a part of it. That's why I appreciate the program so much. But thank you, Doug.
Well, let me say what I think the move by Metro Health towards providing mental health support in our community, and Jesse Higgins as Chief Mental Health Officer, those have all been excellent moves by the city of San Antonio. There is a study that's there will be some interviews that'll be going on this month and next month. Response for mental health. The problem is we know how to do better. We've done better in this community. We need to move now to provide, using the resources we have, to make these mental health calls. And I think that the reality is that until the public demands better service, it's not going to change. I mean, I think that SAPD, I think the chief is pretty much set in his way of doing this. And so unless the public asks for something different, it's not going to change.
So I'm going to pause just for a brief moment. It's 8:28. So those of you who need to leave, thank you for being with us this morning. And thank you, Doug, for this great briefing. We're going to keep talking about it until about 8:45. Next week, Samara Tuck is going to be with us and sharing with us healing from within the Muslim tradition. And so I look forward to you coming back. And in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing something similar, but hearing another story, but a global story of pain and suffering and what's happening there. And so we'll be doing something similar with that. So again, next week, the Muslim perspective on healing. Bill has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So Doug, I appreciate your thoughts here today and your op-ed. Let me ask this question. So in kind of looking for the history of the SA Core program and in the media, what I'm finding is lots of positive writing about it as late as November. And so I'm wondering, when did all this happen? And why isn't it being reported more widely? Because it sounds like a fairly serious change to a functional program. So can you talk about why do you think this hasn't come up in the public discussion yet, and what do we need to do to change that?
Well, I think, I think the shooting was definitely one of those issues that shines a light on on how we do these calls. And let me just say, a similar thing happened at the county when Damian Lewis was shot to death on his front porch by county deputies. At the time, immediately, I contacted Judge Wolf, expressed my concern, and said that the message to families with person with mental health issues was don't call the deputies, don't call the county, don't call the police. And Judge Wolf immediately formed a task force through STRAC and through the county. They stood up their SMART teams. They immediately responded, and they're building those teams. So why haven't we heard more? Well, I can tell you, I hear more. I hear more when people call our office. There are many people who have experienced who have had a bad experience, who have been arrested, who have been beaten up in the process, taken to jail. There have been many of those, but they don't make the press until somebody's actually shot and killed. That seems to make the press. And then people start asking the question, what happened and why? So, and there's another question here. What reason did SAPD stop or reduce the program? Hey, ask the chief. It was a great program. There's a film on HBO called Joe and Ernie, which was done to mental health unit officers, Joe Smaro and Ernie Stevens, who were in the film. It was filmed here in San Antonio, and it shows you exactly how we used to handle calls. And it's a great film. You can watch it on HBO, but that's exactly how the unit ought to perform. We did it. They filmed the movie here. It worked. Why did we change? So you'll have to ask the police chief. I see Louise has her hand up.
Yeah, Louise has her hand up. And you need to unmute, Louise.
Thank you so much for being here, Doug. This is all so distressing. And I hear you saying that we all need to speak up, which is important, but what about the mayor and the city council? I mean, who does it really take to say we need to do this in order to make it happen as it did before?
Well, I've talked to Councilwoman Havarda. She's chair of the Public Safety Committee. I've talked to 2/3 or 3/4 of the people on the council people on that committee. I think there is concern about how we do mental health calls. But again, what I found is there's just not a lot of understanding. There's not, there's an awareness that we have these units, but not an understanding from the standpoint of people who have to make those calls and what actually happens in the process. So that level of understanding is not there on the part of really any of the city council people. I think there's sympathy and there's interest, but I think we need more education, and I think we need the public to advocate for this, because until they do, there's not going to be enough momentum, pressure, whatever you want to call it, advocacy to make a change. So change is not always easy, but we did change from the way it was working to the way that today we do these calls that's not working as well.
And when you say we need the public, what exactly would you suggest that we do?
I think you can talk to, send an email, write, call your city council person and say, we want mental health officers to be the first response to mental health calls, period. That one statement, if they hear from enough people, then they begin to look at it harder, but they're not going to change unless they hear from you. I think the other thing I would say is that any group that you're part of where you think this might be a topic they might be interested in, I'm happy to come talk to your group. We have people at NAMI who can talk to your group. I have a lot more information and statistics on this whole subject, and I could do a presentation for any or lead a town hall discussion on this issue. but it's going to take more people in the community raising their voice.
And I also see comments like Patricia's, have the families who've been victimized by SAPD organize themselves to do a class action lawsuit against the city and SAPD. So there was that community action of advocacy. Maybe they have, and maybe they haven't. I don't know if you know, Doug, but people who are advocates to help make that happen for people who are actually in the situation would probably be extremely helpful.
Yeah, and we've had people contact us and say maybe it's the right time for a civil rights lawsuit. I don't know. That's one thing I'm looking at. I do know that the city puts itself at risk for how they handle, for lawsuits of how they handle some of these calls. I mean, I have pictures on my iPhone of people who have been beaten up. And when I asked the chief about this and gave him the names of some of the people that have had a very bad experience with the police when patrol units call, the police chief said he looked into those and these people were criminals. Hello? They were criminals? They were criminals because they called for help and they were and in the process of their psychosis, they probably resisted arrest and they were arrested and they became criminals. That is the criminalization of mental illness, and it's happening across the US in many cities. It should not be happening here. And we should not be referring to people who have a mental illness as criminals if they're not being taken care of properly, and in the process they get arrested. These are not shootings. This is somebody who's in a psychotic episode resisting arrest because they don't even understand what's going on.
Can you remind folks the name of the SAPD unit that attends the mental health calls now? What's that unit?
The unit is within SAPD is called the mental health unit. Within the Metro Health Department is called SA Core, and that's a difference. That unit was formed by Metro Health and is a multidisciplinary unit and works with SAPD. That's SA Core.
Thank you. That was what was asked. I would also think, Doug, especially with all the work that you've done too with the county, is in what you're, pushing forward on behalf of all of us, is working more with the county. If the counties do, like, come on, let's,
Well,
what's that?
I asked in the very beginning when the county really stood up. They did an outstanding job, incidentally, in standing up this multidisciplinary unit within 90 days. That was a land speed record. The city took a year and a half to kind of get to that point. But the county's done an excellent job. And I did talk to Judge Sakai last week at the MLK breakfast about this issue. And he and I and his staff are going to be meeting. It is a community-wide issue. And in places like Denver, they're not looking at jurisdictions. They're looking at who can respond. And in Denver, they use non-police officers. They use park police. They use fire department people. They use police department. They use people who are trained in de-escalation techniques and on how to treat and how to deal with mental health calls. There are a lot better ways to do it than we do it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we need to bring somebody from Denver down here.
Well, I've offered Councilwoman Havarda, I have a standing offer to fly 2 people to Denver to meet with the Denver people. I've talked to the head of the program. It's called the STAR program. I've talked to him and he's offered all the policies and procedures, the manuals. He said, here, you can have them. This is how we do our business. So, and Councilwoman Havarda is familiar with the Denver program. So, it's more than just being educated about the program. It's going to be deciding that this is it's time to do something different in San Antonio. that's why I feel like the public is so important.
Right. Community.
It's very frustrating.
Again, maybe we need to bring 2 people from Denver here. I'd like to take them out to dinner because of the work they're doing, if nothing else. But you know, let's bring those folks
Well,
here.
you know, I have a standing offer for 2 airplane tickets, so maybe we fly those people here. And I'll work with you, Ann, on that.
Okay. I want everybody to open up their audio if you would. You don't have to open your visual if you're not ready to do that yet today, but if you'd open your audio, everybody, and all at the same time, I invite us to say thank you, to clap, cheer, whatever, but thank you, Doug, for your public advocacy, and you just do not stop. So thank you
Doug.
for that.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Doug.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And look, one last thing, Ann, anybody who does have a concern about a family member, they can call 988, the new number, and they can ask for help. And they can also call the San Antonio NAMI office, the warm line. And we have somebody during normal business hours answering those calls, talking to people about their concerns, making inquiries. Where do I get help? How do I get help? If it's life-threatening, we urge them to call 988 or 911. But we're standing by at NAMI and are happy to talk to anybody about issues or concerns they have.
Thanks, Doug. Great to have
Thank
you
you.
with us this morning. Great to have everybody. It's nice that the sun is out, and I looked at the weather and we're supposed to get up to 72 today, right? Ooh. So enjoy the day, enjoy the sun, and maybe I'll see you at the Festival of Faiths. Definitely, I'll see you next week at the